Coming up on this week's Eastern Conference Roundup edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, Patrick Kane is recovering from offseason hip surgery. The fourth most active points leader in the NHL today is meeting with teams to decide who he will help bolster down the stretch. We'll get into that conversation, discuss some early season anomalies, whether players are starting hot or starting slow. We expect them to bounce back or regress, and more. This on today's edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Mike DiStefano. You can find us 5 days a week. I'm at Locked On Ottawa Senators. Mike is with Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. We call ourselves the Battle of Ontario edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, where we've got your team every day. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube, where a like, subscription, and a comment go a long way to helping the show grow. As always, we're on Locked On NHL's channel. However, new initiative from the Locked On Podcast Network, a 24-hour live stream on the Locked On Sports Today channel. So go check that out and subscribe there. Today is Wednesday, November 15th. And Mike, it's been a strange week for both of our teams as they've headed over to Sweden. They're practicing. Your games are Friday and Saturday. The Senators play Thursday and Saturday. However, they're not playing each other over there. How strange is that?
Yeah, it's really bizarre. We were talking about that on Locked On Leafs. I'm sure you were doing the same on Locked On Sens with Pilsy. But it's bizarre how, these teams who play each other multiple times throughout a year, divisional, interconference, or interdivisional rivals, yet they're going to send them over to Sweden and then not play each other, right? Toronto's got Detroit, Minnesota, and I assume so does Ottawa, right? I find it really bizarre. Do they have an 8 a.m. game as well, Ottawa? The Leafs, Sunday morning, 8 a.m. puck drop, local time, or our time,
Eastern time. Yeah. No, for Ottawa, it's going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday and 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow against the Detroit Red Wings. To me, what really bothers me is I want that Detroit game to be in Ottawa because there was legitimately a home ice advantage. Now, they lost the game 5-2, but there was a legitimate home ice advantage with the booze raining down on Alex DeBrincat. So to take that away for this game, that was the most electric atmosphere outside of the home opener that's been in Ottawa this year. So it's a shame that that's the game that has to go over there. I get it, growing the game. I think that it's a really cool initiative. The other thing is I'm not sure how they picked these teams. In the past, we've seen the teams that go over to Europe. There's a marquee superstar from that country that's going home. Example.
Nylander.
Well, when Ottawa last went over there, it was Erik Karlsson was the captain of the Senators, and Gabriel Landeskog was the captain of the Colorado Avalanche. You get the ceremonial puck drop, and everything's great. The Senators have two Swedes, Anton Forsberg and Erik Brandstrom, not necessarily marquee names. If you were doing a Team Sweden right now, neither of them would probably be on that team. So that's where it's confusing to me. For example, why isn't Ottawa playing? Why isn't Ottawa playing?
Ross. So I'll tell you why I believe this is the case, because these teams do have a strong lineage of Swedish roots in the past. So fans of Nick Lidstrom became fans of the Detroit Red Wings. Fans of Matt Sundin became fans of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Fans of Daniel Alfredsson became fans of the Ottawa Senators. So I think there's a strong lineage there of teams, fan bases who probably have a strong, Sens fan base, Leafs, Detroit. Minnesota's kind of a random team. I'll say that. I don't really know what Minnesota's doing over there, but I guess that's just a hockey market, I suppose. Philip Gustafsson had a great year last season. Maybe they created some Minnesota Wild fans off of that last year. But I think that's probably, there's more lineage to these teams, like Boreas Salming with the Maple Leafs. There's been a very long lineage of Swedish hockey players for that franchise. So I think it has more to do with the history of these teams than it does the current configured rosters.
I don't buy it. And I also don't buy that growing the game, going back to the same place every time. Ottawa, this is their third time going to Stockholm. They went there in 08. They went there in 2017. They're going there now. I think this would have been a really cool opportunity for Ottawa to play Detroit in Mannheim, Germany, where the Sens have Tim Stützle, the Red Wings have Moritz Seider. Both of them played for the Mannheim Eagles. Would have just been a great opportunity to go somewhere new and explore. Sure. I know they've had games in Helsinki before. They've had games in Prague and Czech Republic, I believe. I just feel like going back, and apparently like the facility there is all class. On Locked On Senators, we had a gentleman who went over there and who's going to the games both tomorrow and Saturday. He said the facilities are top end. They went to the practice today, but like, I don't know. I just feel like if you're growing the game, I know they went to Australia in the preseason. Regular season's a bit different. If you're going to send these guys over there, I think they should mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, but I think it's also like a respect factor for the players, right? Like, I think it's also the fact that the Swedish fan base has been, big proponents of NHL hockey. Yet a lot of them have never been able to see them play. Like, sure, they've been there, over the last couple of seasons, and they've been there a couple of times, but I guarantee you there's still many, many, many fans who are going to attend these games over the next 3 days who weren't able to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago when they were there last. You know what I mean? So I think that it's really just kind of a bone that they're throwing to not only the players that are going over and get to play in front of their friends and family. Like William Nylander has 90 to 100 tickets he says he had to purchase to give to friends and family over these next couple of games, including his grandmother, who's never watched him play in an NHL game before because she can't fly over from Sweden. So, I think that it makes sense to go back there. There's really strong hockey roots, and so many NHLers have come through the Swedish ranks. And maybe it's a bone that they're throwing to the players and the fans, give them a chance to watch some NHL hockey.
And I've got the list here. The 2007 NHL premiere was when it first opened the regular season in Europe. There's some, older times before the lockout, but in more recent history, the LA Kings opened the season by playing the Anaheim Ducks in London, in England. Then the next year, there were games all over as like a prelude to the games. But then ultimately they ended up being in Czech Republic and Sweden. 09, they went to Helsinki, and guess what? Stockholm, Sweden. Once again, the next year they went to Stockholm, Helsinki, and Prague. Are you starting to see a trend here? The next time they went to Helsinki, Stockholm, and Berlin, they played a game. And then there was a long layoff without games, 6 seasons without going back to Europe. And then since they've been back, the Sens played the Avalanche in Stockholm. Then you had Stockholm and Helsinki again for the 2018 Global Series, and then Prague and Stockholm once again. So as you said, Stockholm does have a great history of representing hockey very well, or Sweden as a country. So anyways, I'm excited for the games. A nice weekday, 2:00 Eastern game. Good way to kind of maybe have an excuse to start your weekend a little early, but it's always cool to see the different vibe that an NHL game can have in Sweden. Some people may be wondering, hey, isn't the ice surface different there? Typically it is, but they will be installing NHL ice in the Avicii Arena in Stockholm for these games. So it'll be fun, man. Minnesota will leave that to Seth Tupal over at Locked On Wild and the Western Conference Locked On show every Tuesday on Locked On NHL. But 3 Eastern teams. You got Locked On Red Wings. Our hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley, do a great job over there. Mikey and Dave Morisuti have the Locked On Leafs show covered. And Pilsy and I will have you covered Locked On Senators if you're interested in following the NHL's Global Series. It's almost global. About which teams are in on Patrick Kane, we got the list for that and some early season NHL anomalies. That's next. You're listening to Locked On NHL. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Sleeper app, man. Daily fantasy, it's so great to get into. I love daily fantasy. It's such a great way for me to get into the action and also feel like I'm getting into something that I don't have to, stick to each and every game. The possibilities are endless. Whether you're a Sens fan and you just want to make playoffs, or you're a Leafs fan, you're hoping to get a couple wins in the second round, or you're a perennial Stanley Cup contender. You can always dream of winning big. And you can do that also by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. I always go with Brady Tkachuk over shots on goal. Hits it all the time. I believe William Nylander, Austin Matthews would be great choices for that as well. I always like the shots on goal prop because then, you don't have a goalie standing in the way of making sure that you hit your props. Shots on goal, goals, assists, plus minus. You can have it all at the Sleeper app. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. That is the Sleeper app. Welcome back, Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. It's the Battle of Ontario edition of Locked On NHL, where I have the host of Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs, Mike DiStefano. We're up north. If you're watching us on the Locked On Sports Today channel, we love the growth of Locked On in the United States, but don't forget about us Canucks up here holding it down for the Canadian aspect of Locked On NHL. The beauty of Locked On NHL and the Locked On Podcast Network is we have your team every day with local experts on the biggest stories, whether you're football, basketball, baseball, or all of the above with hockey included. You can see what your favorite team is up to on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mikey, what was the reaction over at Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs when you heard that the Buds are one of the teams in on Patrick Kane?
Yeah, we spoke about it on today's show, but ultimately, I don't know if that's a good fit. Like, I mean, obviously, if Patrick Kane wants to come to Toronto and he wants to take like a league minimum veteran contract, like, okay, sure, you're not going to not take that type of championship winning pedigree. But if Patrick Kane thinks that he's still Showtime and wants a massive role, I don't know where he fits. Like they've got the right side of the ice pretty well covered. Mitch Marner, William Nylander's having an unbelievable season playing the right side. Do you really want to kick him over to the left? Like I'm not sure you'd want to do that. And then is Patrick Kane going to want to be a bottom 6 player? Like I don't know what exactly Toronto is thinking here. Like it just doesn't make sense from both perspectives. Ultimately is what I think for this one, but we'll see where it goes. Again, if he wants to come and just be part of the team because they have championship aspirations and be a secondary complementary piece, I think that they could work. But if he thinks he can come in and then they start shifting around, Marner and Nylander and all that just to make it work, that doesn't jive well with me.
He's going to be a power play specialist, I believe, at this point in his career. The defensive game is a liability. I think it's fair to say that.
Sure, but even the power play, like the Leafs have their power play kind of set. I mean, who are you going to move off their power play? Willie, Marner, Nylander, or Tavares? No. Matthews? No. You can have 5 forward unit and kick out, Klingberg or Morgan Riley, who's currently on PP1. Probably not. So there's just, it's not a need. It's a luxury ad if Toronto does make this happen. But I feel like there's other teams that it makes more sense. They'll probably be able to pay him more money and give him a bigger role.
Patrick Kane turns 35 years old in 4 days. On November 19th, Patrick Kane will be 35 years old. So I think it's completely unrealistic to expect him to have the 90-plus point upside that he showed as recently as 2 seasons ago. 92 points with the Chicago Blackhawks in only 78 games. But if he's going to come in, bring 3 Stanley Cups worth of experience, bring an Olympic silver medal, shout out Canada, gold medalist, 2010.
Not the same knee he's doing it all on, though.
That's
the
the
same
thing.
knee.
That's the thing. So you look at it from a perspective of like where's his value? Like, is he at Matt Duchene level value? Like, should he be signing? I know Matt Duchene's getting paid on a secondary contract on a buyout,
right,
but he signed a 1-year, $3 million contract. Like, should Patrick Kane still be demanding a relatively fair wage at the NHL level, or should he be going the Joe Thornton route where it's like, hey, league minimum, I want to play?
Well, that's what I mean. Like if Toronto, if he wants to come in on league men, that's a different conversation. Like you'll take Patrick Kane on league men and you'll make it work. You'll figure out where he fits. But if he's a guy who does want to come in and, generate like a $3 to $4 million deal, it's not going to work in Toronto. But there are some teams who might be interested in bringing him in at that price. And I think that he'd be fine. Like, I don't think that we're talking about a player who's going to be terrible. Like, he's still a good hockey player and he's still going to be worth $3 million. He'll probably end up, on an 82 game, pace, probably between 55 and 60 points still, I would imagine, especially if he's going to be manning some power plays. So yeah, I think he's definitely worth in the $3 million range for anyone who's looking to bring him in and use him as a top six piece.
Patrick Kane played all but the latter half of last season after the trade deadline with the Chicago Blackhawks. He was traded to the New York Rangers, where he had 5 goals, 12 points in 19 games, and then in a 7-game first-round exit, led the Rangers in scoring with 6 points in 7 games. Now, albeit just 1 goal, 5 assists, but still can produce offense at the NHL level. Now, New York Post reporter Larry Brooks, guess that's what I'm saying, Brooksy, reports that not only the Maple Leafs, but also the following teams are believed to be interested in meeting with Patrick Kane and his representative, Patrick Brisson, one of the power agents in the National Hockey League, next week. I want you to tell me, Mikey, which of these teams would be the best landing spot, the perfect fit for Patrick Kane? The Florida Panthers, his hometown Buffalo Sabres, the Detroit Red Wings, the Dallas Stars, or the Tampa Bay Lightning?
I earlier in the year, I would have been more on board with the Buffalo connection there, but Tage Thompson getting injured last night, significant injury.
Twice. He narrowly avoided the first injury, comes back only to get injured again. That sucks.
Yeah, so some leg injury of some sort. He's going to miss significant time, is what Don Granato said yesterday. So that's a tough blow to Buffalo, and I would imagine probably makes them a less attractive option for Patrick Kane. It would be cool at one point, for him to play in his hometown team, but ultimately, I don't know, that injury maybe would make him be a little bit less excited about that option. For me, I think honestly, Carolina might make the most sense here. Like, I think they're a team that probably could use one more big piece in their top 6 and someone who, there's space up on that top power play for him to go and make it work. And that's a team that's looking to get over the hump. Like, they make the playoffs every year, but they end up losing. They haven't figured out how to win in the playoffs, right? And you bring in a guy like Patrick Kane who's done that. I think there's a strong possibility he is the type of guy who could make this team buy in and potentially put them over the top. So I think the Hurricanes. Are you saying so? There's multiple reports. So there's multiple reports here though, because John Shannon's reporting that Carolina's on the list.
Ooh, John Shannon, my old teacher at the College of Sports Media.
Yeah, so John Shannon saying that Florida, Tampa, Carolina, and Dallas are all potentially, as well as Buffalo, appear to be on the list of interested teams in Patrick Kane.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, because Larry Brooks left that out of his.
Well,
so hey, add
the reports.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, the only way to solve it, get them in the octagon. Larry Brooks, John Shannon, throwing down.
Yeah,
couple legends.
Well, I think Carolina's like the perfect fit, though. Like, don't you? Like, now that you're thinking about Carolina, it's like, dude, they could use a dude like Patrick Kane.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the Dallas Stars train, but like Dallas has found so much chemistry with their lines. Like, they're not disrupting either of their top 2 lines now, because you've got the Hintz and Robertson and Pavelski line that's been together for a number of years now. But then you've also got like this Duchesne, Sagan, and Marchment connection that they've found. Is I mean, they're lighting the world on fire right now. Matt Duchesne, I know we used him as a bit of a comparable, as a guy who's a bit later in his career, always been a point producer, not nearly obviously the level of Patrick Kane. Matt Duchesne's got 3 game-winning goals in the last 4 games. So if I'm the Dallas Stars, I'd be weary about changing anything, because clearly they've found combinations that work. And then the other top line that they've got is Wyatt Johnson with Jamie Benn and Evgeny Dadonov. Like, maybe you could see a world where replacing Dadonov with Patrick Kane would be pretty solid. But Dadonov's also been, a solid contributor for them. They better check his no trade clause before before they make any trades, though, if they are going to move on with Evgeny Dadonov. I joke because it hurts so much to not joke about the Senators losing that first-round pick with a botched trade call. But yeah, Dadonov's only got 6 points in 15 games, a -4, and that could be an option. However, I just think, yeah, it's interesting now that the season started, and we'll get in the final segment about anomalies as we are 15 games into the season. But teams that have found a group that works, I think might be a little hesitant to add such a big personality, a big game player, the guy's nickname is Showtime. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, this is not someone who you're adding in to put on a fourth line and just have stashed away for a rainy day. He's going to be a guy who a coach is just going to have to put over the boards every second or third shift, as long as the hip is 100%.
How do you like the fit with Tampa potentially?
The rich get richer, I guess. Like, imagine Kucherov and Patrick Kane as your right wingers. You're just rotating through. I mean, the level of skill. Now, is it too much of the same thing? They're almost identical type players in terms of playmaking, slowing the pace down. Neither of them are going to be forechecking.
I'll take two of those all day long. Most teams would take two of those.
If you're going to clone a player, that Nikita Kucherov might be a pretty good guy to clone.
Right?
Now, I think Tampa's done an admirable job of maintaining their head above water while Andrei Vasilevsky's been out of the lineup. They found a way to push games to overtime that maybe they shouldn't have. They lead the league in overtime losses, but hey, those 4 points, that's the equivalent of 2 wins, right? So you're looking at a world where that would be, I think, a heck of a fit for both parties. I like that fit. Again,
their current second line right winger is Alex Barboulay.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I mean, there's room for improvement, I would say, when it comes to the Bolts' top 6, and Showtime would be quite an improvement there.
Now, he's obviously a guy who wants the puck on his stick a lot. Like, you think that's still going to be a fit there?
Well, I mean, yeah, because I think he's a guy who wants a puck on his stick, but he's also a guy who can facilitate too. Like, he was never like Ovechkin level goal scorer. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he scored 30 to 45 goals a season, but currently the second line, Stamkos, Nick Paul, and Kane. I'd rather have Kane carry the puck and then distribute it to Stammer or to Nick Paul in and around the net. I think that would work out pretty well as a line.
I just don't want him to go to Tampa.
Well,
really,
sure. I don't think anyone wants that unless you live in South Florida.
Seriously. Well, let us know in the comments who should be in the running, who should be the favorite for Patrick Kane, as a decision is expected in the next couple of weeks. We'll keep an eye on that as things develop. But coming up next, we're going to look at some early season anomalies with the NHL's Eastern Conference. That's next. You're listening to Locked On NHL. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. You and I, we spend a lot of time together, 5 days a week over at Locked On Senators and then here on Locked On NHL. So let's have a deeper conversation, okay? Let's talk about ED. Now, when you can learn that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications, you realize what that means. It brings on extended travel. It brings on the next natural disaster or supply chain issue. Doesn't matter to you. You're covered, my friend. Now, you don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio prescriptions. All this is possible because of our friends at Jase Medical. So go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Just remember to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. One verified customer had this to say about Jase, quote, "I'm thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half. I ordered more of my daily meds, and with a year supply, I also ordered the antibiotic kit. I feel secure now." So if you or someone you love would get peace of mind by having a year supply of a daily medication, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Just remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Welcome back to Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Mike DiStefano. You can find us 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators, Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. Every Wednesday, we bring you the every Eastern Conference storyline, and we also make sure that you're following along with each and every Eastern Conference Locked On NHL host. Also, make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Sports Today, where you can get all the 24-hour live stream that you would hope a company like Locked On would provide. We got you covered with local experts on the biggest stories. We've already covered probably the biggest story in the Eastern Conference with Patrick Kane. Is he going here, there, wherever he does end up? Our friends over at FanDuel, I'm sure, will pump the numbers a little bit on the odds for that team to become Stanley Cup favorites. Mikey, who is your early season Stanley Cup favorite?
Oh, good question. Are we sticking with the East or are we going league wide here on this question?
Let's go with the East. And for reference, before the season, the top two teams in the Eastern Conference were the Carolina Hurricanes and New Jersey Devils. Has the first 15-game sample size changed your opinion?
The Hurricanes have struggled a little bit more than I thought that they would. Obviously, the goaltending has not been what it's been in the past and the defending. So I would say that's been a little worrisome. The Devils, it's unfortunate where they're at, like a 500 team basically at 7-6-1, currently on the outside looking in on a playoff spot. Like if we're talking about a team who I think, is not performing to expectation, I would say it is New Jersey. The goaltending, again, has been the issue there. We knew it was going to be, but now they've got injuries to both Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, who've been out for a bit, and that's kind of allowed them to go into this tail slide. They've lost a few here in a row. So I think I still believe in those two teams as two of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference. I think the Rangers, our Rangers need that respect as well. Right now, they're 11-2-1 on the year. They've been outstanding, a +16 goal differential already, which is second to only the Boston Bruins, who, like, am I dumb for still not believing that they're cup contenders? Like, am I dumb for just not having cup contender faith in this group?
For the Bruins or the Rangers?
For the Bruins.
Yeah, that's ill-informed. These Bruins, you know what I mean? Like every time, like I was with you before the season. I had them as a wild team before the season. They will not be killed. They will be good no matter what. I'm convinced that the year could be 2050. And Patrice Bergeron's kid is retiring from the Boston Bruins, and they're still making the playoffs every year and just reigning. Like, what do they have? They have more overtime losses than regulation.
They're 12-1-2 on the year. 12-1-2.
Now, the first 7 games, we were critical of those. There was a lot of cupcake games in there, a lot of bottom feeders. I say that, but then we were joking that like their first 7 games, they played Anaheim twice. Anaheim's one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League all of a sudden. Yeah. So, they did
LA, they beat LA. LA was a good squad. Like they deserve a lot of respect. And look, like I said, like I kind of feel dumb for still not, sticking to my guns here and not believing that they're yet cup contending team, despite being number 1 in the NHL right now. But I would say that they are the surprise team of the league so far. No one expected this to happen. Like you said, we had them as, at best, thought that they could maybe sneak into that 3rd spot in the Atlantic, but more than likely going to be competing with the Buffaloes, with the Detroits, and with the Ottawa Senators of the worlds for, that final wild card spot or two. But no, they find themselves atop of, the Eastern Conference at this point and atop of the Atlantic Division right now as well, and very comfortably so too.
What's amazing is how they still have a bargaining chip in all this as well, if they really feel like they want to add, because there's only one net, Mikey, and they've got 2 number 1 goalies, like 2 solidified number 1 goalies. And that's obviously the reason for their success so far this season, with Linus Ullmark having a .928 save percentage and being the worst on his team by a country mile, because Jeremy Swayman is 6-0-1 with a .944 save percentage. Like, that's amazing numbers.
But don't fix what ain't broke. You know what I mean? Like, what? Why? There's no need to make a move here. Like, I know we spoke on this. I think it was on last week's podcast. The possibility. Edmonton might be looking for a goaltender, and there's an extra goalie perhaps in Boston. A little nude for Ullmark Swapskis. But if it works with the 2 goalies and it works with what they got going, I mean, I wouldn't make any rash decisions here if I was Boston. I would just keep rolling with it until things kind of, hit the skids here. But it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon either.
I was ready to say the Pittsburgh Penguins were the anomaly with their poor start, but now they've won 5 games in a row. They're 8-6-0
Yep.
on the season. Like they look like they're rounding into form. Maybe the
Crosby hat trick last night.
yeah, shout out Sidney Crosby, Eric Carlson with a goal and an assist in that win as well. But for me, it's just like maybe the veteran legs just needed a couple extra shifts to warm up. I mean, I thought that they looked awful for their first few games, and then all of a sudden they've been just world beaters since. So I'm very intrigued by the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're a team where when I sit down and put the games on at night, they're a team that I'm looking at. If they're playing, I'm probably going to tune in because Tristan Jarry is either the best goalie in the world or the worst goalie in the world. There's no in between with him. And I'm curious to see what Kyle Dubas is going to do throughout this season because we know he's a very active general manager when it comes to the trade front. And I'm sure he's calling around the league, whatever he can do to, maybe not immediately. Obviously, they're on a 5-game heater right now, but looking forward to the trade deadline. And if they're in the wild card mix, like this team has so many stars. It's just, can they continue to surround them? And are they in the market for a goalie? I know they signed Jarry, but like a stopgap, like a 1A, 1B, we've seen that's like what you're saying with Boston to keep the goalies as is. Like, could Pittsburgh bring in? Because I don't think Nedeljkovic is the answer. I don't think Magnus Hellberg is the answer. Like, could they bring in a veteran guy who's like, hey, I can push you at the very least to be better each and every day?
Potentially they could, but you look in this 5-game winning streak that the Penguins are on. They got 2 shutouts against the Ducks, who've been a terrific team of late, and the Sabres, who have some potent offensive pieces over there. So I mean, they've been getting some decent goaltending, and that's ultimately, one of the things that we said about Pittsburgh at the beginning of the year is if Tristan Jarry can give them competent goaltending, they should be okay. But we're seeing that he can play well, and if so, they're going to pick up points and wins.
Okay, so get this. There's been 11 starts for Tristan Jarry this year, and the 3 in the middle, let's omit the 3 in the middle, okay? They played San Jose, Chicago, and Columbus in those 3, and he was like good to average, okay? 923, 914, 900. If you take out those 3 games, he has 4 games this season with an 850 or worse save percentage, and he has 4 shutouts.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that team's going to live and die with Tristan Jarry, apparently. It's, if he's playing well, if he's on his game, they're going to win those games. If he's not, we'll see what happens there when it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I think hockey's better when Pittsburgh's playing well. When Crosby's at the top of his game, when he's in the playoffs, the game is just better overall. I hope that Pittsburgh makes the playoffs here.
You were on the Buffalo Sabres bandwagon going into the season. They lose to the Bruins last night. They lose Tage Thompson to injury. And they, in a points percentage, are right down there with Ottawa at the bottom of the Atlantic Division. How surprised are you? And what do you think that they can turn it around quick enough to make a push this season?
Well, I think the Tage Thompson injury really puts him in a pickle. And it sounds like it's going to be long term. We don't have an exact timeline, but that to me probably, I don't know if they can overcome it. Like, I know they got some good young pieces. Like now Dylan Cousins is really going to have to step up. Casey Middlestat going to have to step up. Like there's some guys out there. Paterka's played well, but now he's got to elevate to a new status if they want to stay in contention. Because ultimately Buffalo's been a team that's been outscoring their goaltending woes, we will say, this season. When they win, it's because they're winning big. And when they lose, it's because the goals aren't coming and they're not getting many saves. So I think that's still the case. They're very young in net with Devin Levi and with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Ultimately, I don't think either of them can win them enough games to overcome the Tage Thompson injury. So I'm kind of going cold. If I had to wager today of whether or not I think Buffalo makes the playoffs, I think they miss again. And it's unfortunate because I thought this was going to be the year that they finally took that next step and got into the postseason. But I don't know anymore. 15 games in, I'm starting to soften on that stance.
Any final thoughts on today's show, Mikey?
Yeah, as for players who I think are off to a slow start, it kind of surprised me. But how about Svechnikov, goalless in his first 7 games of the year coming back from injury? It'd be nice if he could score a goal or two potentially for the Carolina Hurricanes. That would go a long way. And how about Ilya Sorokin starting the year? 3-3-3, a 907 save percentage, and a 321 goals against. This guy's a top 3 goaltender in the world. That has to change. He's got to turn those numbers around if the Islanders have any shot of being in postseason contention.
Let us know in the comments who's gotten off to slow starts, hot starts, and anything in between. We are your home every Wednesday for the Eastern Conference Roundup edition of Locked On NHL. We're going to hand it off to tomorrow's power rankings, and make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Today. Subscribe to Locked On NHL, Locked On Ottawa Senators, Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs to get your daily dose, all in a 30-minute episode. So for Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another Eastern Conference weekly recap edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.